Good evening. How are you?
Hey, I think I'm not muted. Hey, good and you?
Good and yourself, Greg. Thank you for joining.
Cool.
Excellent. So happy to have you. We are going to get started in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
So then we'll run through it and we will hand over to you in due time.
Okay, cool.
Excellent.
Great.
Good evening, everyone present. We'll give it 2 more minutes and then we'll get started. Right, and on that note, I think we'll get started. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the very first official spring session for 2023. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to more people joining us in the chat. The rules are posted in the chat. I am your MC for the evening, Stefan Dallapria, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome our guest to this first session, which is fashion trends and aesthetics. This is what we'll discuss. And actually, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our esteemed speakers. So first up, I'd like to welcome Craig Jacobs. So Craig Jacobs, he actually warrants no introduction because he is actually very well known. But for our guests, I am going to actually explain who Craig Jacobs is. So Greg Jacobs is one of South Africa's most recognizable lifestyle and design thought leaders. Over the course of his 2-decade-strong media career, he has highlighted Africa's rich, diverse cultural pulse for publications including the Sunday Times, Elle Magazine, Ogigi, Business and Cultural Compendium, Cream from Australia, and US Weekly from the USA. Craig was acknowledged by the Design Indaba in his inaugural design list in 2004 and co-presented fashion lifestyle program Fashion Avenue with Jody Kidd on a US cable channel, the Style Network, and served as a roving reporter for the Style Report on South African channel ETV for Nikki Greenwald. Craig does not only come with a long list of merits in the professional sphere, but he also comes from an academic background, which is ideal because that's the kind of conversation we are having tonight. He has studied media and sociology at the University of Technology in Sydney, Australia, and at the heart of his beliefs are that our tastes, interests, and consumer behavior do not happen by chance. A panoply of events, stimuli, and environmental influences play a role in what we choose to buy and how we choose to live. Craig is also a vibrant entrepreneur, stylist, media personality, and he has his own label, inspired by the sacred lake of the Vavenda tribe, who believe you can hear their ancestors drumming beneath its waters at night. This has provided him with opportunities to support artisanal African skills as part of his commitment to creating an enterprise according to the circular economy model. So Craig clearly believes in sustainability and has a vision for South Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. Thank you so much. Welcome, Craig. Next up, we have Trevor Ntombela. Trevor Ntombela is a fashion buyer for retail with over 15 years experience. He has been a member of the KZN Fashion Council, focusing on mentoring young designers, and is currently a judge for the Durban Fashion Fair, representing Edgars for the past 2 years. Trevor is currently the buyer and coordinator for the local fashion designer collab in Edgars. He was a judge on the international television show The Fashion Euro in 2022. Due to his work in the industry, he has been featured in local and international publications, including GQ, Elle, and Hype Beast. Thank you for joining us, Trevor. We'll hand over to you soon. I'd like to introduce you to our moderators, Anya Potgieter and Louise McWade. Anya Potgieter is the lecturer of fashion theory, media, and trend analysis at the Stadio School of Fashion. Anya has a curiosity for the conceptual and cultural, which drives a constant state of analytical inquiry to enrich her understanding of past, current, and future developments in global fashion and aesthetics. As managing editor of CIAF's Journal of African Diaspora Fashion and editor of the School of Fashion in-house newsletter, Anya's fashion expertise continues to develop. Our second moderator is Louise McWade. Louise holds the position of research manager at Stadio School of Fashion, where she also teaches the subject of fashion and culture to students pursuing their diploma. Louise is committed to nurturing the critical thinking capabilities of her students and enhancing their proficiency in systematically analyzing and communicating the underlying social commentary within the realm of fashion. She specializes in exploring topics related to South African fashion, with a particular emphasis on matters pertaining to identity, representation, post-colonialism, and gender. Thank you all very much. I'd like to welcome you to the session. With that note, I would like to welcome you, Craig, and I would like to hand it over to you as our first speaker. So just to contextualize this situation, this session is about fashion trends and aesthetics. And as an expert in this field, we have invited you to join us to discuss this.
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us. So tell me, have you prepared anything for this evening?
Yes, I have prepared a talk. I've got a presentation, but I sound like such a technophobe. I'm trying to work out how to share presentation. And I think I've got privacy settings on my laptop. So I've got a Mac. So I'm just trying to figure out how to do that. Presenter mode. Yes. Sorry, guys.
That's no problem. While you do that, Anya, in the meantime, can I talk to you a bit about what you are experiencing in local fashion trends and aesthetics?
100%. So I also actually prepared something, but I'm just going to speak about the ideas. Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction so far, Stefan, and thank you very much for joining, Craig, as well as Trevor. I've seen you in the list of attendees. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I think this is a great start to the spring sessions for 2023, especially speaking about aesthetics. I mean, we're moving into spring, we're moving into summer, and a lot of us are finally feeling that thirst for expression outside again that we might not have been feeling for quite some time. I was reading yesterday evening, coincidentally, after I'd like compiled my thoughts, because something that's been quite major in the way that we engage with fashion and the way that brands present themselves is a new drive for the documentation and the digitization of the way that we dress. The idea that the way that we dress is building almost towards an archive of our own sense of style and our own engagement with fashion. And with that, trends kind of become this new frontier to always keep up with, because we want to track and trace and see how our own aesthetics evolve, how our own engagements with fashion evolve, and also how we can use fashion to express more about our lifestyles than just what it is that we wear. And that is something that has become quite interesting. And I coincidentally saw on GQ's new list of do's and don'ts, one of the big things is to document every fit. Whether you're going to post it online or you just keep it as an archive for yourself, documentation of what we wear, having something to reflect on, being able to trace our own development in style really is a big thing, because our style and the way that we dress, our engagement with trends, is now more and more in a larger social sphere. It used to be you and your friends that would, see your outfit for the day. Now, in our very digitized world, we're seeing a much larger engagement with what people wear. And these influences are coming from everywhere. We don't have isolated instances of aesthetic influence. We're really living at the height of aesthetic diversity, or at least as far as we can tell, this is the heights of aesthetic diversity. It's coming from everywhere, almost all at once, and we kind of have this immense freedom to explore and to choose what it is that we want to engage with in fashion, and how we see our macro ideas then develop in our more regional specific areas is quite interesting, with the reigning effect of Y2K, which in itself was already a very postmodern phenomena, which was already meshing together all of these things that had come before it. And now we're here and we're just really kind of like re-enhancing all of that. I find that absolutely fascinating, and it is the gift that keeps on giving, and it's showing no slowing down on any big level.
Thank you, Anya. That it was quite a summary, and I really do believe that you actually hit the nail on the head. Craig, would you like to contribute at this stage?
Okay, you know what? I am sending my presentation to you, just by the way,
cool.
because I am not getting there. But what I wanted to say is picking up what Anya had actually said. I'm specifically talking about postmodern in terms of trends and in terms of the concept, especially around Y2K. I think we're in a very fascinating place in the world today. But what I really wanted to start talking about, and hopefully my presentation lands, but I'll just keep talking about it through that, is just talking about trends and my passion about trends. I always think it's quite funny when I've been talking about trends now for over 20 years. And I love the fact that when you talk to people, especially creative people, in the fashion world or designers of any kind, and you hear them say what I call is the big lie. And the big lie is when people say, I do not follow trends. Because the truth of the matter is that, I mean, people might think it's cool to say that because you don't want to sound like you're a follower, you're a leader, But the truth of the matter is that trends, for me, it's an embrace and it's an engagement. And the most important thing is we want to feel part of a group. And that's what trends do. Trends allow us to be part of a group, to have a sense of belonging. And that's really important for me about when people want to unpack trends. And they need to understand that trends are actually, it's like the Germans have this word called the zeitgeist. It's the spirit of our times. It's where we are. And there's a whole panoply of different stimuli that all converge together and result in a trend. They could be socioeconomic, they could be cultural, they could be coming from a whole range of different sources. And when they all converge together, that's how a trend comes about. And also, when it comes to trends, there are three big ways, three big sources where trends come from. They come from, I say, the one trend. Thank you, you finally got the presentation.
Awesome.
Yay. I
Sorry,
should have warned you guys that when it comes to technology, I am absolutely terrible. I think we're on slide 6 now.
Awesome.
Yes, the source of trends.
Perfect.
Where trends come from, I think this is really important for people to understand this. They come from generally 3 different places. They come from boredom, desperation, or innovation. And let me just unpack those a little bit more. I mean, boredom is, I would say this is where it's also called like the trickle down in terms of source of trends. It often comes from the rich. You know, they're bored, they're looking for something to entertain themselves, they want novelty. Luxury in particular is one of those trends that came out of boredom because people, the rich, want to show off their wealth. And especially when it comes to things like exotic skins, whether it's ostrich or python, that was because only the truly rich could afford that. So they were showing off their wealth through incorporating these luxurious fabrics. Desperation, on the other hand, comes from the bottom. So it's a trickle up trend. And that's from people, it's like out of desperation, you need to come up with something, you need to create something. Often comes from the poor in society. And that's manifested in a whole range of different ways. I mean, the khaki pants and the t-shirts, those were actually working class garments that have now become ubiquitous in fashion. And that's where that came from. And then innovation, which is the last thing. I mean, when technology lends itself to create something new and dynamic, and then that manifests into society, then that trend becomes pervasive. So I think those are very important, like the 3 sources. I just wanted to drill through on that. And then in the world today, and Anya was also talking about Y2K in the world. If you look at the next slide, it's kind of what I Kim Kardashian. Now, look, I'm one of those people who's not really, it's like kind of question this thing about Kim Kardashian, you know, like how is it that she's such a big driver of fashion? But we cannot deny her power. And the picture I use there is a perfect example of that. I mean, that was, I think, in 2018. Kim Kardashian wears this Yeezy neon yellow dress to her sister Kylie Jenner's 21st birthday. It obviously gets like 3 million likes on the post, but all of a sudden, neon pink becomes the hottest color when it comes to fashion. In fact, according to Edited, one of the trackers of social media engagement, they found that neon products had grown by 743% compared to the year before. And we can link that very much directly to Kim Kardashian and that neon pink Yeezy dress. What's also happened with trends now, and that's because of social media, is that it's sped up so quickly that today, the way in which we engage and embrace trends is so much more faster. But if we go on to the next slide, can pull up. Yes, so that's the ripple effect. I mean, even Women's Wear Daily had mentioned that, the power of Kim Kardashian and the Yeezy dress. Yeah, next slide. I thought it's also important for people to understand a little bit about how the fashion cycle works. And the fashion cycle works pretty much these 5 stages when it comes to fashion. it's the intro stage, the increase, adoption, the peak, the decline, and obsolescence. That's generally how most trends happen. And in general, I mean, a trend usually lasts, if it's actually a proper sticky factor trend, it lasts about a year. Whereas other trends can last a lot longer than that. And what was the other thing that I wanted to say about trends is, although, I mean, social media today, trends happen so much more quickly that they can come and dilute and become obsolete in a very shorter period of time. The trends, though, that I want to talk about, which we can go to the next slide, the mega trends. I think these are trends which we need to explore a lot. But you're going a bit too fast. We need to explore. These trends, I believe, are not going to go anywhere soon. So I think there's a value when you come to design and when it comes to embracing trends and adopting them. I think these 2 or 3 in particular are ones that are going to inform so many other elements. The next slide is kind of a little bit of the precursor to the trend that I want to talk about, and that's the skinny jeans. Now, I actually did this denim workshop on Saturday, and I said to the audience in the beginning, the skinny jean is dead. And one audience member came with their skinny jeans and spoke to me afterwards and said they felt really uncomfortable by me doing that. And I had to apologize. But the skinny jean being out of fashion isn't an incident in a vacuum, because this is how trends work. So actually what happened was, it was around 2016 is when the trend forecasters and people in the fashion industry had started saying that the skinny is dead. Now, most people refuse to believe this, right? High fashion people, first adopters, started adopting different silhouettes, but the mainstream person on the street refused to get rid of their skinny jeans. Then what happened a couple of years later is we went into a once in a century event that transformed the entire world and our consciousness. We were in quarantine for an inordinate period of time where skinny jeans just wasn't comfortable. When you're sitting on the couch for like 6 or 7 hours a day streaming, you started getting comfortable in your sweats and your oversized t-shirt. All of a sudden, the skinny wasn't cool anymore. And when we came out of the lockdown, sales of skinny jeans started dissipating. If you look at the next slide, I mean, even Bloomberg spoke about the death of skinny jeans and how that can actually save retail, because people wanted the shock of something new. Where did it come from, though, and why did it suddenly start working and being adopted now? This is the trend that I want to talk about, where the skinny forms part of it, and it's what I call the 1990s melding into Y2K, which is what Anya was talking about a little bit before. We can go into that next slide. Just that's what I'm saying. For me, in my world, and what I believe is like kind of, and we've seen this a lot, is Y2K. Where is Y2K coming from, though? If you go back to that cycle, the fashion cycle that I'd spoken to before, you don't need to go to that slide, but I spoke about things going through this period over time. Generally, what happens in fashion is trends emerge every 20 years. So it's no accident that we're now moving from a 1990s into a Y2K fascination, because it's now almost 20 years since the 1990s in Y2K. originally, when I heard about the Y2K trend, I started laughing because I'm a kid who grew up in the 1990s. And I remember Y2K was the millennial bug, right? We were all petrified that the computers were going to crash because there was going to be this bug that was going to cause massive destruction. So the fact that it's called Y2K, I just think for me, it's a little bit of an inside joke if you grew up in the 1990s and 2000. But TikTok is the main driver of this trend. If you look at the next slide, I just took a few screen grabs from different kids on TikTok and how they've started interpreted Y2K. There's no accident in the world that Britney Spears is in the news again. Usher's released a new album where people are comparing him to Beyonce. Why Von Dutch caps, oversized jeans, body perforations, ironic fashion is such a big trend at the moment. So it's because I think, ironically though, the Y2K kids do not like the Gen X guys. And yet the Gen X guys are the ones around this trend. I think it's ironically, we're going through the same kind of mood in the world today. There's so many different elements around body diversity, gender fluid. In the 1990s, it was called androgyny. The rise of supermodels like Kate Moss. If you compare that to today, and there was fragrance, one by Calvin Klein, which was for everyone. These threads and these trends are all manifestations of what happened about 20 years ago. So I think that for me is one of the mega trends. The second trend that I think, there's a Vogue article about the Y2K trend. And the second trend I wanted to go into, and this happened, actually, this is the New York Times this week, and this is one of my favorite writers on fashion, Vanessa Friedman. And she sat through the shows in Milan, and we went through Milan and just gone from Milan, and now we're into Paris Fashion Week. And she penned this article, I think she even penned it yesterday, where she said, where are the big ideas? She sat through shows from Yves Saint Laurent, Dior, and this was a question mark. And I thought about this and I thought, the thing is, in fashion is also a pendulum. So it skews from one direction to the other. And what I believe we're going through now is we have mega trends all operating on the one side, all at the same time. We've got the Y2K trend, which is all about irony, but there's also really another important trend that's coming through, and we're seeing the manifestation right now in the world. And this is what I call the new clean. You can go to the next slide. The new clean for me is, it's about cleaning out your closet. It's about getting rid of all the mess you don't want anymore. It's about cleansing yourself, cleansing your palette, and also cleansing your wardrobe. So Vanessa Friedman might have thought there's no new ideas here. But I'm saying the trend is actually, this is a very big idea. And if you go through to the collections, I mean, what happened before and where's now? So the next slide, I think when it comes to fashion, we had this very big moment for Gucci in the world with Alexandre Michel, who was the head designer for such a long time, over 8, 9, 10 seasons. He introduced this quite strong approach to fashion. It was layer upon layer upon layer, influence upon influence. Nothing was too much. The ostentation was everywhere. And then yet, what happened? He reached a plateau, as always happens in fashion. It's no accident that I always think, like, I mean, you know, you don't want to be ahead of a fashion label in Europe, because you're in today and gone tomorrow. And Alexandre Michel was about to celebrate quite a key milestone birthday in his life. And then that same week, he gets called into the office and said, your time is up. We're going in a new direction. And the new direction was introduced this week. If you go to the next slide, you can see exactly what it is. I mean, Sabato and what he's doing at Gucci. Vanessa Friedman might say it's no new ideas, but it's a clean slate. I mean, Gucci has gone and pared down everything in entirety. If you look at where fashion is today and what people are wearing, and you look at this and you kind of think, this is so boring and plain. But what luxury is actually telling us is true luxury isn't loud. True luxury doesn't have to be crazy when it comes to a logo. True luxury is all about the detail and the quality, because when it comes to fashion, that's always what high fashion was about the little details and the quality. The Gucci collection isn't in a vacuum, because when trends happen, they happen in different places at the same time. And when we went from Milan this week and we went to Paris, as you look at the next slides, you can see the collection from Saint Laurent, which happened a couple of days ago, and then the next slide, which was Dior. It's very clean. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the world embraces this. It's because it is quite a seismic change. It's a minimalism and it's a point of view, which is very different to what we've been experiencing before. And those are, like I was saying, those two big trends of the mega trends. One trend that I think we can't ignore, and it's something that's my passion point, which is the next slide, which is all about sustainability. And I think when it comes to sustainability, I mean, when I started my label in 2004, and I mentioned it was going to be green, most people didn't understand what that meant. I remember someone quite senior in Fashion Week saying it should be about the clothes. Why are you trying to change the planet? And yet that is what's happening in the world today. And I just think I wanted to remind people about why this is so important. And if you go to the next slide, this for me just encapsulates what it is, why the fashion industry needs to be more sustainable. What we don't realize is that the fashion industry in itself is one of the biggest contributors to global carbon dioxide emissions. And we're using so much water in our construction of our garments that's so harmful to the planet. In fact, if you keep going with the slides, I think they'll keep going. Yes. In fact, the worst thing that anyone can do is wear fast fashion. And that's because fast fashion in itself has become the second biggest polluter in the world today. Just in context, fashion today does more harm than the oil industry. So there's a reason why sustainability needs to be such a big trend that people need to not forget about. For me, though, what I think is really important is that it's about the consumption of the clothes, which is the most harmful thing. We're getting at a point now where retailers are trying to confuse us. If you go to the next slide, what they're trying to do is we're learning all these things about green fabrication, reusing polyester. This fabric is organic, but if we're producing so much clothes, where's the clothes going to? And in the world today, clothing has become the second biggest cause of landfill. Second biggest cause of landfill. If you tap the screen again, the figures will come up. And I don't think I need to repeat them. I think it's more powerful for people to read this. Between 2000 and 2014, the amount of clothing produced has doubled to 100 billion garments in the world. And 35% of the fabric used ends up as waste. It doesn't even get made into clothes. What fast fashion has done is led to people now buying 5 times more clothing what they did in 1980. And on average, the worst part about it is we wear clothes only 8 times and then we throw them away. Lee Edelcourt, one of the most amazing trend forecasters in the world, I sat in a talk she gave a few years ago. And she said it's a bizarre scenario in the world today where a sandwich costs more than a dress. And so I think when it comes to fashion, I mean, if there's one trend that no one should ignore, it's been more conscious. And I don't think that necessarily means you need to use green materials. I think you need to think about the way in which your process is done to ensure that you reduce as much harm as possible to the planet as you can. And that for me is my little talk about the two big mega trends and one trend that we should never, ever ignore when it comes to design.
Thank you, Craig, so much. That was very, very insightful. Before we continue to Trevor, I just have a question here from the audience,
Yes.
from Marie Sutherland. She asks, based on your trend insight, do you think we will see the new clean luxury trend trickling down to mainstream, or is it the other way around? And then she asks another question, how do you think retailers can communicate the true value of sustainability instead of it being a buzzword? Or do you think the greenwashing stigma is too overbearing in the industry currently?
That's a lot to answer. Okay, I'll talk about the new clean first. Look, I think it's a trickle down trend because it's the super wealthy that are going to be embracing this more than everyone else. I think we're going to go through a period in time because of the ubiquitousness of logomania, right? And because there's a certain level of the kind of person who wants to show off their wealth, they're often new money and they want to wear the logo upon logo. So what's happening now is going to be a trend that's going to take a little while for the rest of the world to embrace it, because it's something completely different to what we've been seeing for the last 8 to 10 years. So it's going to take a long time. But in the way it is, when it comes to trends, especially amongst the first adopters, the trailblazers in fashion, and the true wealthy, they're going to embrace this because they know that this is now their new way of exploring stealth wealth. Because to show off your wealth isn't cool anymore. We've got a world where there's so much economic discrepancies between the rich and the poor that you don't want to show off. You don't want to show off how much money you have. So that's why it's such an important trend. When it comes to sustainability, I think it's a mindset issue. Greenwashing is so pervasive in the world today. sustainability has become a marketing ploy. But it really is a ploy for people to sell more merchandise. And that is the problem, because more merchandise means more harm to the planet. So you can create 100,000 bamboo t-shirts that is produced well, but if it becomes landfill, then there's no solution. It's doing more harm than good. So what I think is the retail model has to change. I think that we need to go back to an old way of doing things, because I think when it comes to trend and innovation, it's not necessarily what's new, but it's revisiting what happened in the past. And I think what we've lost sight of is the value we place on clothing. That clothing is an investment, and clothing is something we need to value. So it's changing a mindset. It's also because when someone says, oh, I picked up a bargain, I'm like, there's no bargain when someone was chained to a sewing machine to make this. So we need to, I believe that there's going to come a time where we're going to be willing to pay more for clothes, because we're going to understand those clothes last longer. It's a completely different economic model. I think the other thing that's going to have to happen is customization has to be part of the sales journey, that when you buy something, you can customize it. And I think also retailers need to find ways of encouraging people to return their clothes, to give them value for that, and create a value chain and a cycle where those clothes can get repurposed. So what I'm talking about is a whole different way where we think about consumerism. I think it's not just about sustainability in a simplistic way, about organic. I think this is a mindset change that has to happen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Craig. Sorry, accidentally raised my hand. That was incredible. And your touch points in terms of starting with the Y2K, I love that you called it the new clean. That's the term that I'll definitely be adopting from now on, because it has been manifesting in all these different ways. And I would almost like to proffer the idea that we can see a relationship between the new clean as an aesthetic trend and sustainability as a consumption trend. But I guess time will tell in terms of how that develops. But thank you very much for your contribution. We will at the end have more Q&A, which I'm very much looking forward to. But I am now going to hand over to Louise to introduce our second speaker, Trevor, and to take it from there. Thank you very much, Craig. Thank you, Stefan, as well.
I think you're on mute, Louise.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, great. You guys can hear me. I'm also going through some technological issues, but I'm using my cell phone, which will work. The laptop gave up, so I'm like, okay, whatever. So anyway, hi is everyone?
Good to see you, Trevor. Thank you and welcome.
Okay, great.
Feeling good.
Great. Just as Craig was speaking about the exit of Alessandro from Gucci, I'm still recovering from the fact that Sarah has exited McQueen. So it's like that era of those designers, those creative directors is coming to a sad end. I do have a feeling that the guy from Balmain is also going to exit soon. So let's see how it goes. The high fashion industry is quite brutal. And yeah, so let's see how it goes. Okay, so I've been given the task of speaking on the global south, which is how the international trends trickle down to the local fashion industry or the street culture, and how our street culture has also influenced the global stage. So just to go to the first slide. Okay, so how I wanted to work this is two ways. I just want to speak on the influence of the post-apartheid youth subcultures, which was Amapantsula and Izikotane. Am I still, can you guys still hear me?
I think we can hear you loud and clear. Can you see your presentation?
Yeah, and I'm looking at the laptop while, so
Beautiful.
It's perfect. So
Beautiful.
so the post-apartheid youth subculture began in the early 90s, and it still influences the trend to this day. As we spoke about the 1990s and the Y2K, I believe that it's also happening in the local street culture. And just to go through, and then the second part of it, I'm going to speak about the Ama2K youth culture, which is, it's a term that we use to describe the new kids, the Gen Zs, we call them Ama2K in our slang, and how this Amapantsula and Izikotane trend from the early 90s and the late 90s and early 2000s influenced them today. So I'm just going to start with the first slide, which is the Amapantsula. So Amapantsula, it also came from the early 90s. They were all about Brentwood clothes, check shirts, bucket hats, All Stars, Converse, Dickies. And if you look now, I just bought, I'm a very fashionable person, or I think I am. But I just started buying my Dickies again. When I walk down the streets, the high streets in Durban or in Johannesburg, if I go to Maboneng or I go to Bram, I see this again. I see how the trend is coming back into the new generation of street culture children, or the youth, or the Y2K, there as we call them. So that's where it comes from. That's where this trend or this movement of this Y2Ks, as I said, in Bram and in Maboneng, comes from. And then after the Mampuntula came the second slide, which is Izikotane. Izikotane were the children of the Mampantsula. They were more eccentric and more free. You know, it was after freedom, and they were free and they were colorful, and it's all about expression. They used to have this interesting, which I didn't agree with. They used to take Ultramil and throw it, and it was all about flashing and money and Versace, even though those brands were not the real luxury brands from Italy. But it also shows how the international fashion industry started to impact us even back in the day, because that's where Versace and Gucci came from. But they didn't even know what it means. They used to call it Italiana. It's like an Italian brand, even though they didn't even know the real price of it. And the more flashy you are, and the more brands you were, the more powerful, and the more in charge you were. So it was all about self-expression, which is as I go into the presentation, as Craig said, that we're going to this minimalistic movement, and the end of logomania, or the decline of the logomania movement that we saw from Gucci and Fendi, not as much as Dior, but it's going to take a while for the mass South African consumer, or the mass South African street culture and the Y2K to move away from that logomania, because it's in their roots. It's what they are. It's part of their DNA. So for us who are in the fashion industry, and who look at the trends and watch Vogue.com and all of these international runways, we might move into the minimalistic move and the whole Zara, and which has also just brought that whole minimalistic look to South Africa. But the mess is still going to be very, very loyal to being loud and colorful and vibrant and into this whole logo mania move. So even if you look at the celebrities that we look at, the Sombizis, the Mamkizes, if you watch South African Music Industry Awards or an event, you'll see how we are dressed from head to toe in Gucci, head to toe in Louis Vuitton, head to toe Fendi, even though some of them are fake, which is apparently another trend in South Africa, which we are big fans of because we can't afford it, but because we want to fit in, and we believe that it's the flashiness that comes from our culture. So I would like to see how the minimalistic look or the new clean takes over the South African fashion industry. It's going to take a while, but it's going to be interesting to see how we accept it and we consume it. Then after the Izikotane, then there was a movement. I'd like to call it the Skrikri gang, which is, it was when, if the Amampantsula, and it was also the trend that I'm talking about is also very music. Music plays a big role behind it. For example, Amapantsula was a traditional Zulu music and taxi drivers and that type of music, very KZN type of music. It's Tatamiya, that's the type of music that came from there. Izikotane, it was Kwaito music. And so every genre or every era of genre comes with a new wave of trend or the way to dress. When Skru came, it's when the hip hop culture came into the forefront. Not necessarily the American one. The American one does have an influence, but it was the hip hop of South Africa, and it's like the street scream movement. It's Ricky Rick, may soul rest in peace. It's KO. It's Squatter Camp, and there was a whole movement of hip hop in South Africa, which also, if you look at the images, it's loud. It's colorful. It's out there. It's who's got the best sneaker, who's got the best T-shirt, and so forth. And then what's also interesting, if you go to the next slide, is the movement of, I'd call it the retro thrift. And that is, it's very big in Johannesburg, in Maboneng and Bram. It's students. There's a whole second time around. There's a store called Second Time Around in Cape Town, which is one of my favorite stores, where people like to thrift. There was a movement. It's still relevant today, of thrifting. And it's also, but if you look at the clothes that they thrift, it's also very loud. It's very 90s, but everything is loud. Gold chains, sunglasses with gold chains on it. So, but as I'm moving on, it all comes from that seed of that Amapantsula and Izikotane. So you can see how it has moved from that era into our era, but it still maintains the same aesthetic, the same print, the same color, and the same attitude, that it's all about showing off and being loud and being colorful and being expressive. And so the next slide, which is quite interesting, it's a more of it's a smaller niche market that I think I fit into. It's the street labels. I believe it comes from the whole international movement with websites like Hypebeast and High Snobiety, where brands like Dope Store, Tubob, Lukhanyo Mdingi, Refuse, Broke, and Sol are they have taken over a market. There's a market that they're managing to tap into, and it's working great for them. And what's I love about this new brands that are proudly South African is the fact that the bigger retailers are collaborating with them. If you look at Refuse, he's now has a collaboration with Mr. Price after he won the South African Fashion Week title last year or earlier this year. Sorry about that. And then Broke is now has a collaboration with Old Khaki, which is quite impressive that a brand like Old Khaki would collaborate with the brand like Broke. So there is that they can see that there's money here, and then there's a market here, and there's a consumer, and so the big retailers now see the reason for them to collaborate with this local street labels. And it's young, it's youthful people. It's also the whole Ricky Rick movement. And I think it also, if you look at internationally, how Louis Vuitton has also collaborated with street brands or street labels like Palace. In South Africa, we don't have those big brands, but those high fashion or luxury brands per se, but we do have big retailers, and the retailers are now collaborating with the street labels because that's where the movement is going. So I've just finished that part of the trend, just to speak about why South Africa is so expressive and is so into the logomania movement. It's because it's in our DNA. It comes from our uncles. We grew up with them. They taught us how to dress up. We are really expressive in how we dress, and it's a trend that will be with us in the next couple of decades per se. And so that's where I just wanted to start the presentation and to just emphasize on that, on why we are this type of colorful and expressive nation. The second one I just wanted to speak about also, there's a trend that I'm also noticing with South African fashion labels, which is what is very impressive to me. It's also cements the fact that the first section of the presentation, which spoke about the loudness and the expressiveness and the prints and the logo. I don't like the word logomania. How we love logos, and which we want to show people that we are wearing a Rich Nisi t-shirt, we are wearing a Dolce & Gabbana suit, we are very expressive about that, which is interesting because the international fashion industry is moving away from that, but for us, I believe it will soldier on. So on the first slide on that point, I just want to speak about the logo, local logo and print. I'm very impressed with how South African, I can't believe this actually has happened, because I've never thought it would be where you can see where a fashion designer can create a print that we as consumers can recognize. Because I know what a Chanel looks like, we know what a Dior looks like, we know what a Fendi looks like. You don't need to, a person doesn't need to tell you what they're wearing, you can just see it from them. So I look at the first dress, which was a fashion show that I went to recently in Durban, and her name is Mumsimang, and she does this African print, like the prints or the drawings that you saw on the rocks on the Kengu caves, and because that's her aesthetic and that's her print. And it's when a customer is wearing her this print, we know exactly who it belongs to. The second one, it's my close-up. I believe that we all know who this brand is, but we know it because of the print, and we know because of the fact that he's into the knit. And the third one is Mancho by Palisa Makubung. It's her face actually, and she made it into a flower. She also was one of the first fashion designers in South Africa to collaborate with H&M. So, but what I wanted to emphasize is how print and logo and expression still plays a big role in the South African or the global South trend. The second slide there is also just a continuation of this logo and print. The first one is this guy that I spoke about, Refuse, who's now available at Mr. Price. It also has an authentic print that when when you wear his stuff, you know who it belongs to. The second one was Ezeketo. He did this chicken feet print on his dresses. So when you see that, you know that, oh, it belongs to Ezeketo. And of course, the third one from my left is Imprint, which is also, you know, he created this whole knit with his logo. It's also just going back to South Africa and its love for expression and showing off that they're wearing a label. As I spoke about knit before on the previous slide, there's a trend which is called, I believe it's called, I would call it the knit, and it's what local designers have tapped into, and it's worked for them, and it's just it makes them revenue. There's something about this whole knit movement in South Africa. The first one is Refuse, the same guy that I spoke about. Richness, of course, this polo neck has become such a staple for South African consumers, and of course Maxhosa that I spoke about. And then the next slide, it's Chulab, who's based in Cape Town. Chu, I call him, I can't pronounce his surname very well. And then we have Lukanyum Dingi. And then we also have Imprint. Imprint was all about, you know, woven fabrics, but then you moved into knit because there is a market in this knit. But every time that I go to another slide, I would just like to emphasize that you can see that it flows. Everything speaks about the Bambatsulas and his Kotane that I spoke about previously, who expression, logos, showing off what I'm wearing, and yeah. And then the next slide that I want to speak about is especially, I think this one especially for the ladies, it's the reimagining of traditional attire. I think this is because we are such a diverse and cultural rich nation, we are very patriotic to our culture. And as the younger generation, as much as they love their heritage, they love fashion. So the reimagining of traditional attire has also been such a big trend for a number of years, and it will continue to do so because designers are so creative in the way that they reinvent and they rejuvenate the whole heritage and culture attire. So I just wanted to just add some visual images of some of the designers that I saw and how proud I was of them in reinventing their traditional attire. So the second lady is, the first lady is Indoni. She's she is a Durban-based designer. Second is Sean Majosi, who is a pop artist, and she's wearing a Shangane inspired skirt, but it's reimagined for, you know, for the new generation of fashionistas who are still in touch with their heritage. The third dress is also from Indoni, which I thought was spectacular. And the way that she prints, she printed like crowds on, and this whole Ilembe and Zulu nation theme is also been so powerful because of the Ilembe production, which has been a hit. The next slide there, it's also, you know, the shweshwes have been around for decades, if not maybe a century. But it's the way that it's been reimagined from the likes of Stone Cherry from back in the day, Sun Goddess, and even now it still continues to be reimagined by the younger designers. And just to also add into that, it's I just wanted to also show some of the prints, and also the Shangane skirt coming in through again, and also how this designer, the first designer, which is Xavier, which is also based in Durban, has teamed up a basic white shirt, a basic crisp shirt with a more traditional inspired look. And yeah, so my take on the trends, the global South trends, is just going back to the fact that we are a very colorful and bright and vibrant nation. And I don't see this trend or this movement going anywhere anytime soon. I think, as I said, I hope the cleaner look takes its precedence, but I have a feeling it's going to take some time for it to be consumed by South Africans. But there is a market, as I said before, with who is more into the minimalistic look. But the mass majority will stay being vibrant, being colorful, being all about logos and being about expression. Yeah, and that's me in a nutshell.
Oh, thank you. That is absolutely fascinating and so rich and so creative. It's truly inspirational. So thank you so much, Trevor. Before I hand over to Anya and Louise, just quickly, I have a question from Marie in the chat. She says, do you think that a new subculture and style tribes will emerge relating more to new clean trend, as you mentioned? And I think you did address that. You said that, maybe I'm misparaphrasing you, but you said that you're not sure how new clean is involved because maybe it's not culturally relevant to street culture. And so a subculture such as Izikotane will adopt at a slower pace. Or do you believe that local styles and subcultures are too strong, basically?
Without me sounding very morbid, I think if I'm understanding the question is that will the green movement take charge in South Africa, or will it have a place here?
Yeah, I think the green movement and the new clean movement. But I think we're actually getting a bit ahead of ourselves because those are the questions that we are going to address to you and Craig now. Louise, do you want to actually contextualize that a bit, because I know you've done quite a bit of work in culture and that kind of thing.
So, Anya, have you got the slide that, well, that's it. These are a few prompts that we need. I'd actually thought this would work better in the beginning, but as we have gone through these presentations, I think it is actually appropriate now at the end because it ties in with quite a lot of what has already been said. So I was going to take you back on a little historical journey. Where did we start from? And so that goes all the way back to the mid-20th century. These are things that Craig has also suggested. When we looked at fashion designers, Western fashion designers, in a way felt entitled to pick out the inspiration, the motifs, and even materials from African fashion and incorporate it into Western fashion. So it's sort of a translation of what Africa was into a Western fashion aesthetic. We can also go into the whole idea of adopting elements without actually crediting who they came from or who they belong to. So we look at that cultural appropriation, which also became quite a contentious issue. But subsequently, if we look at the past 2 decades, we've been, I think, South Africa, especially after 1994, we've been grappling with an identity. What is our fashion identity? And I think we've been asking that question over a couple of decades. I think in the last 2 decades, we are seeing a new generation of African designers who are actually quite recently becoming quite prominent globally. These designers are now also, if you look at what's going on around them, it's kind of come together, benefiting from increased global interest in Africa and in South Africa. So they're also benefiting in the interest from globally, but at the same time, they've also succeeded in creating well-crafted, well-made, and well-marketed collections that are more conceptual. They bring in they and incorporate into their traditional and cultural background, but at the same time, okay, so I would not like to say in a Western fashion, but perhaps something that appeals to the Western world, but it isn't. It is not the same as it was in the mid-20th century, where basically African elements were taken and incorporated into Western fashion. We're kind of doing it the other way around now. We're taking our own African or South African heritage and incorporating some Western fashion elements into it. And yes, they are completely recognizable as African. Looking at the cultural elements that are being integrated into I think this generation of fashion designers. So also, I was just going to say, sort of going back to the post-apartheid 1994, where we almost, when we were looking for that identity, we were looking sort of very almost literally to cultural aspects of South Africa and of the tradition, where I think now we have moved somewhat further away from that, which I think is an incredible journey. We had to start somewhere with the designers that were prominent at that time, and somehow we have moved slowly along and towards Craig, this new clean. I think there's space for more than one look, and just having gone back into this was just a bit of research I actually found today that I'd never put together, but things like ethical and fair trade fashion that's happening in Africa, it's a necessity in Africa, and because of there is investment in that. I think Africa will be forerunners in that kind of production because it is an absolute necessity to be taking care of the people who are crafting these clothes. And I think Africa also is incredibly talented in that regard as well. So that is a very positive aspect from Africa, I think, is because we actually have what it takes to start producing locally a more sustainable or clean fashion than anywhere else in the world, because of our own artisanal qualities and craftsmanship. And then there's another little sort of catchphrase, trade, not aid. So where the idea is to start developing companies that will be successful, that will produce profits and will employ local people to, and I think that is actually, the world is looking at this. Okay, it's my forecast, but in my very positive feeling about this, the world are investing, and we will have overseas investment because it is a positive movement towards clean energy and good trade practices. So I think we've sort of come full circle in a way from that past sort of colonial era, and then that feeling of entitlement to just take from Africa, which included every idea, even, you know, to take it and then transform it into something that is not African. And I think we're taking that all back. And that's why I feel quite positive about what can happen in Africa, and I feel in a way it can't happen anywhere else.
Thank you so much, Louise. That's amazing. Yes, thank you so much. I think I will now hand over the last, I will direct the last 3 questions to our 2 speakers. So thank you, Anya. You have actually got the questions prepared. Brilliant. So please go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Louise. I love the positivity there, and just in terms of being able to tap from Craig, everything that you've presented, and Trevor, everything that you've presented, I find myself and all of the conversations that we usually have in this academic space really tapping into both of those, this idea of embracing the new clean whilst I'm actually wearing a South African knit, like from a local designer. So it is so interesting to see all of these ideas just exist in our team's meeting here tonight in our spring session. So the first question then is something that has been tapped on, but how would you describe the relationship between the development of our trends in sub-Saharan Africa, but then in relation to the global fashion industry? We are aware of the trickle dynamics that you have mentioned, Craig, but how would you further tap into like our willingness to embrace and almost what it takes for a trend to really take a hold here? Thank you.
Should I answer first, or Trevor? Or it was directed at me, right? Look, in terms of South Africa and looking at us as part of a global village and looking at how our trends and what we do, whether or not it's going to impact on the rest of the world, I think what's so exciting at the moment is what digital has done. It's given us a platform to talk on a global stage. What we've seen is Amapiano in a fashion, in a musical term, has become quite a strong trend globally where people are embracing it. And I think we've seen the same thing with fashion to a certain extent, where we've got designers like Teba Magugu, who's exploring a very specific South African aesthetic and introducing it to the rest of the world. But I think as well that I think it's all for me, it's the excitement of embracing what you like and what you relate to. I think these conversations we've been having in the past about culturally what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, I always think about the Japanese and think, how do the Japanese feel about the fact that everyone in the world who's not Japanese wears a kimono? And we don't hear them complaining about that, or cherry blossom. So I think that when the rest of the world adopts things from us, it should inspire us to show them even more what we create. And I think what's really important is we need to change this mindset that we're not good enough for the rest of the world, because I think that's the only way we're going to be able to thrive and grow, is by embracing who we are and celebrating that, and then the rest of the world will notice.
Amazing. Thank you. Sorry, I was typing something in the chat just to contextualize there, and definitely agree with your thoughts that we have to also send our stories and our fashion ideas into the world so that it can become something that is as much a part of the everyday fashion vernacular as the kimono, for example, has become. But I mean, that's all on all of us to tell those stories, and it is a very exciting position to be in. Our second question is.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Hi.
Oh, you want to add? Hi.
I just want to add something quickly. What I've been thinking about the last few months is the fact that I believe that originality and creativity is going to be so important now that the world is moving to this whole AI phenomena. Where I've seen some fashion shows on Instagram where the clothes are made by AI. I think that South Africa or sub-Saharan, what to call this thing? Sub-Saharan Africa, and our indigenous and our heritage is going to play a very important role in how originality and authenticity is going to be so important. I think that the rest of the world, while they're going AI and they're creating designs by AI, I think that there's going to be a very big hunger for just the human touch and the human creative side of fashion. So I think that's quite exciting for South Africa and our heritage and our creators and our designers. And so yeah, let's be creative and be authentic, and yeah.
Thank you very much for your addition, Trevor. I want to kind of keep you on with regards to where the second question goes in its idea. You've mentioned heritage, handmade craft, this whole idea of seeing the human in the fashion itself. And the second question in its broadness says, how would you define the aesthetic need for trends locally? But the second part of the question, what do you believe the consumer priorities are when they are attracted to buying and engaging with local fashion brands? How would you unpack really their priorities for what they want in that and how they can add that story to their own personal story?
I'm in a crush of the South African consumer and the South African designers, because I work for a retailer now that introduced a collab range in one of our stores in Sandton, and that happened around 3 years ago, and we started with one store and 3 designers. Now we are the third year. We are in 10 stores and we have 24 designers, proudly South African designers. And I've been taking learnings from consumers and from especially with the sales report and the feedback and the silhouettes and the colors and the prints that the consumers buy into. And I know that a part of me believed, or the perception is that South African consumers are, because of the economy and because of what's going on in our country and inflation and the petrol prices going up and food also going through the roof. But there is that need, and there's a certain patriotism that's been happening in South Africa in the terms that we are really supporting local. The way that this success story with the collab that I'm doing with the current retailer has just mushroomed into this incredible story or an incredible business, or it's just proves that how patriotic we are as South Africans. But the most important thing that South Africans, those consumers, they are willing to pay 5,000 rand for the dress, or the high priced in a store where the rest of the range, the highest price point is 800 rand, for example. And the thing that they always want is originality and to be different. They don't want items that are mass produced. They want items that if I'm wearing this dress, I want to see 5 or 6 in a rail, so that when I go out, there's not going to be a large number of people wearing exactly what I'm wearing. So they really appreciate originality and individuality. So that has played a big role in the success of this collab that I'm doing. But I think that it speaks on everything. It speaks on the vast majority of South African consumers when they do consume designers. I believe that, and I also have do a lot of talks with young upcoming designers and mentor them to say, listen, the most important thing is make sure that you are different, make sure that you are original, make sure that you are priced right. Customers are willing to buy your product if the quality is good and your delivery is good. I believe that what has been missing with South African designers and consumers is that we have a lot of designers who are creatives but do not know how to run businesses. So that's where everything comes in, where it's make sure that your garment looks presentable to your consumer. The packaging is important because it creates it makes them feel special. You create a mood for them. So that for me, what will continue making South African designers more successful or continue to be successful is just make sure that they're original, they authentic to who they are, and South Africans are not looking for international brands. If they want a brand from that looks like something that you saw from a Prada runway, they'll go to Zara. But they will come to you because they want something original, something different. So I think that has played a big role there, and I hope that it's answered the question.
If I can just also jump in with what Trevor was saying, because I think it's really important. What he's talking about is we have this perception about the South African consumer that they don't support local. But I think the consumer in South Africa needs opportunities to interface with local, because then they have a choice. I'm also in another retailer in Sandton, and I'm increasingly every time overjoyed by the fact that South African consumers are willing to pay a premium for local. And I think it fits into two different things. It fits into what Trevor was talking about in terms of creating an aesthetic that you can't find anywhere else. But I think more importantly, what people also need to understand is by buying local, it is actually sustainable, because it's manufactured here with a low carbon footprint, and it's supporting the local industry. So it's got more trickle down effects than anything else, because you're not only putting food on the table for the designer, but the makers and everyone else in the value chain. So I think that it's quite an exciting place when the touch points are there. Locals, as long as the local consumer understands the importance, it's not just about the fashion, but it's the whole ecosystem around it.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Craig. And you've actually spoken to a comment that was made in the chat about this whole idea of how do we engage with our consumers, and how do we educate the South African market in terms of purchasing and pursuing local. And it is, when we talk about this at scale and the impact that this has on how our own trends can develop, which is what the last question was focused on, but I'm thinking we might have to move on to the audience Q&A. But it is so wonderful that everything that has been discussed so far really links into the key questions that everyone have when we discuss South African fashion. We all acknowledge that there is this wealth of an industry, this wealth of aesthetic development that is taking place on the daily. The local smaller street brands are building their own cult followings in a way that we haven't really seen at this scale. And then beyond that, also coming into a space where consumers are like, I want to pay more. If I know that it's local, I'm enhancing a local brand identity. I'm enhancing myself as a fashion person, as an individual. there is this kind of burgeoning opportunity to move forward. But thank you very much for the contributions. I think I want to see what everyone has said in the chat so that we might be able to round up on a final few notes. Also, Stefan, sorry, did you want to add? You were unmuted there for a moment.
No, I'm fine, Anya. You're doing great. Continue.
Then I will continue. Awesome, thank you. So there, I'm just going to go into things that I have not read so far. Apologies if I'm missing something. Please do post again. So one of our lecturers actually mentioned that when we build platforms in our classroom where we create this knowledge space for the future buyers and planners to understand the importance of local fashion, that this can then build into their perception of how we create ranges for local retailers. And I think there was possibly a gap where maybe locally we were not discussing local retailers as much as we have been, say, in the past 10, 15 years. And now, as the stories are further developing, there is a larger opportunity to prepare graduates for that. Then, Craig, there's a question for you from Marie. How do you believe we make consumers aware of your mentioned ecosystem, and what do you think are the best platforms to connect with the local consumer?
Okay, sorry, I saw, can you repeat that question again? I'm so sorry.
No,
I just zoned out there.
okay, so Marie is asking, how do we make consumers aware of the mentioned as well as the local fashion ecosystem? And then importantly, what do you think are the best platforms to connect with the local consumer? Because what I want to add to Marie's question is, we've seen the death of the fashion magazine in South Africa. We no longer have our steadfast, old trusty platform. So what would you say is the opportunity and the best way forward?
How, in terms of, if I were to talk about this very personally, about my own clothing label, what I decided a few years ago is to allow the merchandise to talk directly to the consumer. I realized that when it comes to fashion publications in general in South Africa, they're so driven by interpreting global trends for their consumer. They take a Western approach to things, which isn't necessarily the way that I want to tell my story. So I think the most important thing that anyone in the fashion industry needs to do is be their own loud hailer. I mean, and you need to talk to your consumer directly in every way you have an opportunity to. And also, you need to, it's a conversation, because clothing is a form of communication. So you need to find ways of talking to them all the time. We've got tools like social media where you can have opportunities to talk directly to your consumer. I think there's so many other ways that we can do this that we never used to be able to do this before. But I also think we need to be innovative about things. We have to go out there and do things ourselves. So talking to people, anyway, we have an opportunity by word of mouth through your customers and through social media. I think that's the most effective way of telling your story.
Yes, and absolutely. As I think it's always been proven that as long as the story that you're telling is your own story and you're not trying to hang it on the tree of someone else's story, or as you mentioned, these platforms that try to frame things in a way that are not necessarily unique to the stories that we can tell through fashion, we actually lose a lot. So word of mouth, get on that social media, and build a community around fashion, because fashion is one of those incredibly powerful community building tools. I mean, I'm biased, but I can't imagine one that is stronger than fashion, and especially locally, where we see it happen literally on the streets. We see it happen at School of Fashion. It really is absolutely fantastic to see it develop all day and every day. Stefan, are we concluding at this point?
Yes, I think Yashtil has his hand up, so I think we'll take one more question from Yashtil, and then we can conclude.
Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry
Good
for the
evening.
question.
No, don't apologize.
I just wanted to know, to the panel, one of my friends is starting a brand, and we've been going through the processing of cutting patterns and trying to source material and stuff, and it's become so costly in terms of trying to locate good quality. I know you guys are talking about how the South African wouldn't mind paying something, they know it's good quality. We've tried so many like options of trying to import, and the textile tax kills us on that side. Tried to produce in South Africa, and the labor cost just goes through the roof for what is a blank t-shirt. For like, I'm just going to say like up and coming brands that have not established any type of like loyalty to any people, how do you think we work? How do you think an up and coming brand works around this? Because I've seen 2 or 3 brands just try and come up and fall completely on their face because of certain aspects that they can't control, whether it be their textiles, importing of stuff, and like just in general. I spoke to the owner of Cultish, Ryan, and he told me that they actually have a factory in Cape Town, and you know most brands can't afford that, can't afford to start up a factory or purchase from that. How do we work around that? How is there a way, or do we have to sort of like knuckled out or?
I'm almost too scared to answer this question because the truth is it's very hard. If I was not restricted from swearing, I'd say a swear word. But what I wanted to say is the thing about it, and what we need to always recognize, is a few years ago I went on a trade mission. I've done a few around the world, but one that was very stayed with me so many years later was I went to Ireland and I met with Irish designers over there, and we started chatting about their experience and their challenges and opportunities, and I sat there with my jaw on the floor because I thought, here we are in Europe, it must be so much more easier for them to be able to have access to the best fabrics at the best price and being able to produce. And they have the same challenges we have. I think the fashion industry is not for sissies. So you need to be able to be willing to have a thick skull, thick skin, and you have to be innovative and come up with solutions within the boundaries and parameters you have. A lot of people in the industry go through the same problems. A lot of fashion students come out of fashion school and struggle. But then we have fashion designers who come out and they blossom. So it's all about you finding opportunities and being innovative yourself. I think what's also really important is sharing information. I love the fact that, for instance, a friend of mine, Anna Marie Pretorius, started a WhatsApp group where local fashion designers are all together, and when someone has a question about something, they post it on the WhatsApp group, and someone provides them with the solution, whether it's a technician to help repair a sewing machine, or to where I can find this kind of fabric, or who's looking for a seamstress and that sort of thing. And I think information sharing is really important. And I think also resources. So I think also what Alina, for instance, is trying to do with Viasa in terms of allowing people to have access to all elements of the value chain, I think that way as well, I think people can grow. But Still, I'll go back to it. Fashion is not for sissies. So yes, there's going to be challenges, but if you find those solutions, you can flourish.
Right.
Oh, hi. Just to add into what Craig has, I know, I also, after fashion school, I tried to go into fashion, and then I left the fashion industry after 2 months. So kudos to Craig for soldiering on and doing his thing. On my side, I'm not sure how other municipalities work. We have been lucky that in the KZN municipality, the trade and the industry has been very involved in supporting local fashion designers or the fashion industry or the creative industry as a whole. This weekend, I just went through the Durban Fashion Fair, which is basically like a fashion week, but it's like a business fair. Because what I've noticed with a lot of fashion weeks that I've attended is that it all becomes about the fashion, and then you show your clothes for 5 minutes, and then what happens after that? So there is a business fair where people from the industries and funders come, and the designers present, and there's retailers who are present, who have buyers, and there's a few designers that I've assisted with the help of the municipality and the KZN Fashion Council in Durban to assist them to get funding so that they can be able to produce for the retailer that I work for. So also the fashion fair that I've so please, if there's any designers out there who want to pursue have a fashion house and be the next Rich Mnisi, etc. Go and try the Durban Fashion Fair, which is basically in Durban, but we do invite other designers where the winners do get prizes and they do get sewing machines, and what I love about it is that everybody, most people in the industry, whether it's pattern makers or factories, sewing factories, or people who provide with fabrics, they come there and they select their best designers and actually sponsor them with sewing machines and fabrication. So the government is slowly but surely coming into the party. So also just put your name out there in the government, whether it's CEDA, whether it's small business funding, and see what they say.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, I think I see Louise's hand up, but we have to unfortunately conclude. Louise, if you can just keep your comment or question very, very brief so we can conclude.
It's brief. I agree with Craig about fashion is not for sissies. But what I'd really like to leave you with, I was reading a article about Tebe Maguru in Vogue, and one of his comments, which made me sad, but he said there were days when he had to choose between buying the fabric or food. So yeah, it is tough, but it is worth, I think, just being able to accept that. Look where he is today, and he did have to give up food for those years when he was building.
Absolutely, Louise. That's very good points, and it comes down to the systems systems of inequality, the economics of our particular situation in this country, the global economics. I mean, it's all very rough. We see the price of living going up all around the world. And I think even Craig referred to these economic tensions in the beginning. So I just want to say thank you to each and every one of our guests that joined us. I hope you drew some value out of these discussions. I want to thank our moderators, Anya and Louise, for moderating the discussion so perfectly. But most of all, I want to thank our guest speakers, Trevor and Craig. You have contributed immense value for us tonight, and I wish you all a pleasant evening.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Craig and Trevor. We're doing this again, definitely.
We're doing this again.
Sometime. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm
Yes.
humble and honored to be part of it. It was amazing. It's also just learning from you guys and your comments and your feedback. So it was a win-win situation for me.
Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Stay blessed.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Is everybody still here?